Joss, how you doing today, man? We were just talking about it before we hopped on the recording, but it's hot out here, and we were saying that if we were in this book, like I think it would be worse because I would just be like just straight up like drinking like flask of whiskey, walking around, just
Back in the day when like the food pyramid was a thing, right? They would tell you like, hey, drink 8 glasses of water a day, right?
hmm
And years and years and degrees Celsius of climate change later, right? Now you hear, okay, 3 to 4 glasses an hour, depending on the weather.
hmm
All of which to say, like this book's pretty much scuppered my plans to go wandering in the Mexican desert because I would not last a day.
Well, if you are going to be going and wandering in the wilderness, you if you are going to be going, you might want to have some knowledge of herbal lore. You might want to have some knowledge of plants and stuff. And for that reason, well, actually, not really for that reason, but just in general, because we like him here, we're bringing back. He's the first guest that's now a first recurring guest now on the
Yeah.
Socialist Shelf. We've got Drew Mason here come back on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you having me. I'm always down for this. I love it. And I'm holding on to
Yes.
that title. I'm proud of it.
Hell yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
get like I think 3 times you get a challenge coin or something like
Okay. Yeah. Let's work
that.
something
I
out.
just made that up, uh, but yeah, yeah.
Three
Some
times challenge coin, 1 year shelfer coin, 2 year shelfer coin. By the
Y'all
way,
be
invest in
tired of
shelf
me.
coin, y'all.
do not. It's the worst. Yeah. I did have somebody ask me. He said you could have you could have if you had merch, which we're a long way from that, but if you had it, it could be like shelf life or something like that. And
Shelf
it's
life.
Ooh.
shelf life.
Okay. There you
Yeah.
go.
That
And I
sounds
was
like
like,
some bougie bottled water for like readers.
I guess. I was trying to think of puns on it though. Like you have like shelfie, like a selfie, but I don't know what you do with that. I don't know. I'm not good at this. There's a reason I'm not like a marketing or advertising guy.
And hey, every June, young man, put your pride on the shelf.
Oh my god. There you go. There you go. But yeah. How you doing, Drew? How you doing?
I'm living. I'm living and living pretty good today. I got to take my babies out for a dirt magic class by the river.
There you go.
Uh, I unfortunately had to deal with an onslaught of folks because it is that time. Good God, they are
Mm.
swarming in droves here in the Great Smoky Mountains. It is a madhouse out there. But we found a little quiet spot by the river. Found a bunch of cool stuff. Found a bunch of mushrooms.
hmm
Found some chanterelles getting started. They ain't quite ready yet. That rain, I think, is what's got them popping. But yeah, I was real happy to see that. But yeah, I had a good day. Any day out in the woods by the river with the babies and the wife, playing with mushrooms and plants. I mean, shit. I ain't gonna ask for nothing more than that.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. No, I
100%.
grew up in Tennessee for a long time, and people would always say stuff along times of like, oh, Tennessee, all the hills and stuff. Well, I'm from Middle Tennessee is the problem. So it's just flat, just plateau basically. I mean,
I cannot stand. I'll be honest with you. Well, it's a lot to do with Nashville. It's because I just hate Nashville.
yeah, I wasn't in
But
Nashville, but I was closer to Nashville. Everywhere, anywhere. The thing about Nashville is if you're an hour out of Nashville, you can see it because there's no hills leading
there's
up to the
nothing else.
Hmm. So my kind of like signal for whenever I'm driving through Nashville, because I go up to Kentucky a lot, is like I'll be 20 minutes or so outside the city, and my music is jacked into like my radio via a fucking like Bluetooth thing, and I'll just start hearing a sermon all of a sudden,
Mhm.
and that'll last until a little after Nashville because there just happens to be Christian radio on that particular channel that I use for my Bluetooth, and no shade on that, but like every so often Jesus just hijacks my phone.
You come through Nashville, it's what you're gonna listen to, Betty.
That's how I know. That's how I know.
I do think they've got those interstate posters that say Jesus is calling, will you answer or whatever. I think that's literally what's happening to you.
It's
I think
funny
I've seen that.
because it Middle Tennessee has always reminded me of that stretch you hit when you're coming up. Yeah, I was born in Mobile, Alabama. Lived the first half of my life down in Mobile, and 10 years. But that stretch coming out of Mobile, going up to Montgomery, and then on up to Birmingham, that middle part of Alabama, it reminds me of Middle Tennessee. It's just alike, and that is where that famous "Go to church or the devil will get you" sign is on that route on the interstate. And there's a bunch of signs like that, and you will, if you got the radio playing, that's what you're gonna get hitting that little stretch right there.
We got a sign.
It's similar. I mean, me and Joss are in Georgia now, and I think West Georgia you can really lump in there too. It's a very similar type of land. You really could have your own, like, honestly, like, in just that region, you could just have a sort of region where not a whole lot is, but it's got its stuff to it. It's little, like, it's highway curiosities. This isn't.
I mean, no, there's a lot of cool forests and a lot of really fertile ground out there. But when I was doing surveying work, I saw what they were doing out there. They build these crazy chemical factories out there that are the size of cities.
Well,
and it's wild, dude. Like you drive for an hour, you'll see nothing, and then all of a sudden there's this Blade Runner looking fucking structure. It's crazy, dude.
Dude, literally in South Georgia right now, which it's a little different because you've got more swamps and stuff. It's still very very rural and very open. You've got right now, and not to get it too far off topic, but because you've got so few people living down there. And I'm not talking about like Savannah. I'm talking about like closer somewhere like Folkestone and really near Okefenokee and stuff. Because aside from Savannah, there's nothing down there. There's Valdosta, there's a few people, but really there's just not a lot. They're building. They already built it. It's an ICE immigrant detention facility. Get this. And so they already built that. They're building it right now. They just announced they're going to turn it into the biggest ICE detention facility in the United States in South Georgia.
Jesus.
Now, and they can do it because they're building in a town with like something like 1,500 people. 1,500 people across I don't even know how many square miles, and these people don't have a Walmart, they don't have a hospital. So you're talking about that made me think of that, and they're doing that while they're starting to strip mine the Okefenokee. They just signed off on that last year. I saw that. Crazy shit, it's crazy. It's like, we got all this land, it could be growing stuff. What's the most horrifying shit we can build on it? Exactly. No, we went down there, or I went down there a few months ago to talk to some folks who live in the area. None of them like it. None of them like the idea. Well, we ran into a few cops. They liked it, but they got moved out there for it. Literally nobody though. We went to the trailer park, which was really the only like homes there where like you had the trailer park and you have where like the cops and prison people live. And nobody at the trailer park liked it. There was the trailer park and a few old houses that had not been repaired in years. But anyway, I'm not trying to get us too far off topic, but I think I can loop it together a little bit because some of this darkness we see here in Blood Meridian, that darkness that McCarthy invites us to look into, man, it didn't go anywhere.
That's what it is.
It lives in the dirt.
That's it. I mean, that really is a great point because, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. The tactics have changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's become a lot more palatable for the media.
The language perhaps has changed, but
the things they're doing now, the funny thing is when I look and I see, they're strip mining the Okefenokee, they're building Cop City in Atlanta, they're building these chemical plants, they're burning down the Smokies and stuff. When I see that, I can't help but think this is what the characters in Blood Meridian like spilled their blood for to win this. Like it's crazy, like that all that sacrifice. I mean, horrible sacrifice, terrible things, but all that, just horrible war, not to build some paradise or even an idea of a paradise.
Oh yeah.
Like, to
y'all
take what was good about the land even further.
Y'all ever read King Leopold's Ghost?
I'm familiar. I've not read it.
It's the one. It's the one that's about like the Congo Free State, like the colony that Belgium set up. That was basically just like the King of Belgium's personal property and all the horrible shit that went down there. And you send your you send your lowlifes, you send your disinherited third sons who were not got anything else going for him, down to Africa, right? And you tell them, okay, you're better than these people. You can do whatever you want from them. And what do you get? You get people sodomizing people with dynamite.
Yeah.
Yep.
Literally.
Yeah.
Now imagine that book. Imagine like that book written from those people's perspective. You pretty much got Blood Meridian.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's exactly it. And like the principles, the core of it, you know, is it's all the same. It comes back to the same thing. And the judge discusses it, you know, in detail a lot of time, and as do other characters. They, you know, there's definitely a lot to. It's unapologetic in its depiction of, you know, that thing. And as I was saying on Twitter before, I that is the American way. That is American values, in my opinion,
doubt.
as I see it.
No doubt.
You know, growing up here.
Alrighty. Yeah, absolutely. So that's an overview right there. That's what we're getting into. If you haven't picked up on it yet from what we're saying, from the episode title, from wherever you got this from, we're talking about Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. At the time of this recording, it's been how long now since Cormac McCarthy passed? Just a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think 2
Yeah.
weeks, something like that.
Yeah.
It's not been very long. It's been less than a month. You know, and we're going to talk about him. We always intended to talk about him, but we moved up our timeline a little bit because it seemed timely, you know. Really, and we can talk about this later, but he was kind of the guy that when I was in college, if he was the easy answer, you said, who's the greatest living American author? It was just the easy answer you could throw out. I don't think it's so easy an answer now to throw out now, but
No.
especially since Toni Morrison died a few years ago too. She could have worked too, but we can talk more about that. But let's talk about Cormac McCarthy himself before we dive into this book. And Joss, I think you've got a basic overview, though I'm sure both of us will also have our inputs here and there. So Joss, take it away.
Yeah. It's I have kind of a rambling, rough timeline here. So yeah, feel free to interject.
Rambling rough timeline just kind of describes his prose in general.
That
So I
is
think
literally-
and his life
Yeah.
too. I mean, that's how he gets down.
Yeah, and by choice, you know.
Oh yeah.
Charles Joseph McCarthy Jr. That was his birth name, and he was born. He actually shares a birthday with me. He was born July 20th, 1933, in Providence, Rhode Island. Listeners of the podcast may remember that as H.P. Lovecraft country. And he was one of 6 kids from an Irish Catholic family, and this family moved to Texas in 1937. So he was 4 years old at the time. His dad worked as a lawyer for the Tennessee Valley Authority. And he lived most of his childhood in South Knoxville. His childhood home, I found out, actually burned down in 2009. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, we lost that little bit of history.
Yeah.
And the family had land, they had woods, they had maids in their homes, so they were fairly well off. McCarthy himself said, I'm leaning kind of heavily on his first like major like publicity kind of interview with the New York Times in 1992.
Because he didn't give a lot of those worth noting.
No, he did not. He did not. But he said we were considered rich because all the people around us were living in 1 or 2 room shacks. So kind of well off for the time for his area. And he went to Catholic school. He didn't see the point in going to school. He said, and this is a mood, I felt early on I wasn't going to be a respectable citizen.
Hell yeah.
That's my boy.
Yes, sir. You know, he had plenty of hobbies. You know, he got into you know, he said he had 40 or 50 hobbies, right? And you know, he could have given a hobby to everybody in his class and still gone home with a couple of dozen, right? So, you know, certainly a man of many interests. He studied physics and engineering, though, at the University of Tennessee from 1951. He loses interest. He drops out in 53. And that's where he has his first encounter with his first kind of interest in writing is sparked. A professor has him edit a book of 18th century essays for punctuation. Which, I mean, we've Jacob, I know you've, I don't know, Mason, if you've been in like the copy editing space, but that just sounds tedious.
Yeah,
oh, man.
Yeah.
Especially that old language. It's like, is that supposed to be there? Is he meaning? Yeah.
Before this was standardized, yeah.
But you can feel that in his work a little bit, though. That like, I'm gonna do what I want with punctuation. Like punctuation works for me. I don't work for punctuation. So you know.
Yeah. Well, and indeed, you know, somebody who does deep dives into that kind of material. Although I wasn't able to find out what exactly the essays were about. Maybe I will someday. So he described himself as having, as I said, just about every hobby there ever was. He didn't really discover literature till he was 23. Now, at that time, he joined the Air Force. He served from 1953 to 57. He returned to college in 57. He majored in English. And at this time, he publishes 2 short stories, Wake for Susan and A Drowning Incident, in the Student Literary Magazine. He wins a grant from an arts foundation for creative writing for both, at which point he drops out in 59. By this time, he decided to write for a living, and he changed his name to Cormac, which is a family nickname from a couple of aunts of his. And there's a couple of explanations out there as to why. My favorite is that he did it to avoid confusion with this famous ventriloquist dummy at the time named Charlie McCarthy.
Wow.
Apparently ventriloquism was big.
That's wild.
So he drops out in 59. He starts writing for a living. In 61, he marries his first wife, Lee Holloman. And they move to a shack in the Smoky Mountains. And they have a son, Cullen. And fairly shortly after that, she divorces him because he, as I understand it, he wanted her to get a day job on top of taking care of the baby and on top of the chores around the house so he could focus on his writing.
Yeah,
So
he was
one track mind.
pretty famous for that. You know, I mean, even like you hear folks talk about him around here, you're just as likely to hear like it's a good thing he could write because he wasn't worth a fuck.
Yeah.
Well, because that's the thing, right? He said himself, I always knew that I didn't want to work. You have to be dedicated, but writing was his number one priority.
He worked hard, not working. I like that.
Exactly. And as we'll discuss, he spent some fairly long periods with not a whole lot. From that New York Times interview I mentioned, he was asked if he ever paid alimony for his various divorces, and his response was, "With what?"
Yeah. Honestly, yeah.
So, but fortunately for him, 4 years later in 65, Random House picks up his first book, which is The Orchard Keeper. And he says himself, it was the only publisher I had heard of.
Yeah. I love that.
So, again, like one shot, one kill, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's praised. So it's praised for his similarity at the time to Faulkner's work. It actually gets noticed by Faulkner's final editor, who himself went on to edit McCarthy for 20 years, and it wins another award from the Faulkner Foundation. And he basically lives on award grant money most of the time from various literary foundations. Which again, it's between those, it's you have a sense of how rough it is because at one point at this time he's kicked out of a room in New Orleans for non-payment of rent. That room was $40 a month.
Wow.
Which 1960s money, 1970s money is different, but still.
It's still not a lot though.
Yeah.
Still not a lot. So, but 65, he wins a traveling fellowship award that year from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. And he goes to Ireland on this money, and it's on the trip over that he meets his second wife, Anne Delisle. They're married the following year. Same year, 1966, he gets a Rockefeller Foundation grant. He travels to Europe on this grant. They land in Ibiza, where he writes his second book in 1968, Outer Dark.
Oh, yeah.
And
which is so crazy to me. I'm just to think reading Outer Dark and thinking that he wrote it in sunny Ibiza or whatever. Like, what the fuck is going on in your head, bro?
This is a guy who spends a lot of time staring at walls. You know what I mean? Like,
does he write in just like a dark, like in a dark, cold room with
right.
No windows and like, why go to Ibiza to do that?
He got the inspiration for The Road from just looking out of a motel window. He could have done that anywhere.
Yeah.
One assumes. I don't know. But so in 1969, they go back to Louisville, Tennessee from Ibiza, and they move into a dairy barn, which McCarthy himself renovated. And
like with his own hands, or like
with his own hands.
That's cool. Cool.
Yeah, so he did, he was handy. You know, he did
He
chores.
could do shit. He chose
yeah.
not to.
Oh yeah.
You know, his wife loved that too. She's like, all right, so when you want to renovate a dairy barn.
This was incredible to me. So his wife was interviewed later, and she said, I mean, Jacob, you said that she provided the caveat that, you know, McCarthy was upfront about who he was and what kind of lifestyle that he led. You know, you knew what you were getting into, kind of. But she also said in that interview, somebody would call him up and offer him $2,000 to come speak at a university about his books, and he would tell them that everything he had to say was there on the page, so he would eat beans for another week.
Yep.
I mean, that's if there's gangster shit in the fucking in the writing community, you know, like that is it right there. I mean,
Yeah.
like, oh god.
Oh yeah, I mean, here's a guy who doesn't do the whole literary circuit thing. You know, he doesn't do lectures, he doesn't do book signings. He's you know, not interested in all that. He's just writing because he feels that he has to. You know, this is what he does.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it does really speak for itself. I mean, let's be real. Like, he knew what he was doing. He knew, and I've heard him say, you know, I always knew that I could write, you know.
Yeah.
Because you know, he was especially around here, like he was a raconteur, man. Like, you know,
Mhm.
just if he was talking, then it was a cool story, and you were gonna want to listen to it. You know, so like he was always gonna do, he knew from just talking to people that he could always enthrall them, you know. And and when he wanted money, he could, you know, turn that that intrigue into money, you know. I guess
Mhm.
when you feel that powerful and you just know you got it like that. Fuck.
What's notable to me is videos you do see of him, what interviews he does have. So often he is a great storyteller, but he is so very rarely still talking about himself and his own work, even when he is talking.
Yeah.
And usually he loves to refer to other writers. He loves stuff in the rare interviews. So it is interesting. There is like this, it's not that he's not willing to be introspective. It's just that his works are already so introspective, already telling you so much.
That's a good
And
point.
like you
Yeah.
said, it's there on the page, man. You know,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you can find
really
examples to the contrary. It's not a hard rule, but just in general, you know.
Yeah.
So it's in that barn that he writes Child of God in
Mhm.
1973, which, as I understand, might go even harder than Blood Meridian.
No.
No?
No.
I've not read Child of God, so I don't know.
I really, 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 really like Child of God a lot. And it makes sense, you know, that he was in a dingy old dairy barn that he rebuilt, you know, when he was writing it. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's not dark
Mhm.
and gruesome in parts, but it's and gross in parts. There's a lot more that's just, I would say it's it leans heavy on the disturbing side of things, and the gross side of things pretty well, because it's like unapologetically raw how people are, you know, and the things that aren't normally described about their everyday life and functions. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Mhm.
It gets into some of that kind of stuff. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't say it's, you know, if you're squeamish for violence and stuff, it's not going to hit you. It's not as violent as Blood Meridian, of course.
Oh yeah.
But um and it is dark, but I wouldn't say, a lot of people go really heavy and say, oh, it's so dark, stay away from it. And I just like to kind of push back on that a little bit, because it's so great. And
Yeah.
another one that's very important for the times, in my opinion. Very, you know, it's a character study on what all these little weird little boys online, you know, talking shit to women all day. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's about them. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I'm glad that's a good word for it. I think character study. I mean, maybe I just had that kind of prejudice going into it because it's more of an intimate kind of tale.
Yeah.
You spend so much more time alone with this person.
Right.
We'll do Child of God one day.
Mm.
So they stick it out, he and his second wife, until 76. McCarthy actually leaves Delisle and moves to El Paso. And he's there for 3 years. He writes Suttree in 1979, which he'd been actually working on and off for 20 years. It's based in large part on his own life, his experiences, and people he met. Also in the 70s, he's contacted by PBS to write an episode about a drama series called Visions. And the episode, The Gardener's Son, is about a mill worker who ultimately kills his tyrannical boss. And that's where I kind of got the first hint of the political in his writing, because he's very I mean, apart from Blood Meridian, of course, because he himself is very private with his politics, from what I was able to find.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if he just didn't think that was too terribly important to the interpretation of his work.
I don't know. To me, it seems like that would have been one of those things that he specifically didn't. I don't know. Maybe that's what he was talking about. Like, it's there on the page. What you can discern from the page, is how I feel about it. And maybe, not getting into like hard explanations is a way to keep the conversation open with everybody. You know what I'm saying? Which is what you have to do if you are a raconteur in Knoxville, Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be able to discuss, you got to be able to tell the horrors of war as they truly are, while still, not letting folks know that you're anti-war or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, folks around here, politics, it's one of those things. I guess you find it everywhere, but here in the South, especially, in a place where it's very mixed and always has been in Knoxville, going all the way back to the Civil Damn War, so yeah, like I that's why I feel like, you don't get any like hard outright explanations of his politics. I think that was on purpose, to keep it open, so it couldn't be like couldn't be nailed down by anybody else trying to tell, explain something about him that he didn't explain himself. He didn't want people doing that,
Right, because once you have a label, then it's, indelibly kind of your stuff is looked at through that label, and and maybe that's what you intend, but also maybe there's just stuff written on the page that you want people to consider.
Well, and it seems like a lot of what he's writing about, he's more interested in what was, in a lot of ways.
Yep.
It's just what interests him, like in everything, really. Like, I mean, even when you read, something like The Road or No Country for Old Men, that's like either modern or in the future. In the case of The Road, it still feels like what was, or it's all calling back to something previous in a way that is just more interested in origins and roots than it really is in the concept of the future.
I'm gonna put a pin in that, because I feel like we could talk about that when we get into the text.
Yeah, you're right. Carry on, because I know you have a little bit more bio here.
No, and so does my cat, if you heard her, but
Not all that.
We've mutually agreed that her opinion doesn't count. So in 1981, he's awarded a MacArthur Fellowship, and it's worth $236,000. And it is on that he travels to the Southwest to research Blood Meridian. And from then on to at least the early 90s, by the way, he lives in a stone cottage behind a shopping center in El Paso, which he self-identifies as barely habitable.
Wow.
So you think,
by his standards.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. You think a guy who eats off a hot plate, cuts his own hair, lives a very Spartan lifestyle in the first place, what he would describe as barely habitable, right? Wow. And so Blood Meridian drops in 1985, and by this time, it's not exactly clear just how much of a sensation he would become. Because again, that New York Times article that I mentioned, it only drops in 1992, the month before All the Pretty Horses comes out.
Yeah, that's his first huge financial success, or market success. Obviously, he's done well. He's impressed the foundation people and more, but like the reading public, I think it's All the Pretty Horses is the first one that does numbers.
Right. Because up to then, he's essentially a writer's writer, as he's described.
Yeah.
Before All the Pretty Horses, right? None of his novels sold more than 5,000 copies in hardcover. None.
Yeah.
For most of his career, he didn't even have an agent.
In fact, the original, some of the reviews from the 80s of Blood Meridian just don't get it at all. They're just not. A lot of people don't get it now, but like they don't get it in the way of they're like, he's just trying to impress us with how dark he is. And it's like, he's not trying to impress anybody.
Nope.
He might be trying to depress you. But, but anyway, yeah, go ahead, Josh. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
first no, you're good. You're good. You're absolutely right. His first major recognition comes from All the Pretty Horses that year. So he wins the National Book Award, he wins the National Book Critics Circle Award. He goes from not selling 5,000 hardcover copies of any of his books to selling 190,000 copies of All the Pretty Horses in 6 months.
Oh yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
He follows up with The Crossing in 94, Cities of the Plain in 98, a play, The Stonemason, between that in 95. He writes No Country for Old Men in 2005. It's adapted by the Coen brothers into the film 2 years later, which is an amazing turnaround to me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Wait, 2000. He wrote that in 2005. I thought it was a little older, actually.
I did too.
It feels older.
It's. I mean, again, Cormac McCarthy is one of those people that you're kind of surprised is still around. Like who feels much out of another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true.
And between that time, he releases The Road in 2006.
Oh yeah.
And as we mentioned, as we kind of touched on, he gets the idea for the book while he's staying in a motel with his son from his third wife. He married her in 97, divorced her in 06 while they lived north of Santa Fe. She doesn't really enter into it. But the son does. It's adapted for the screen in 2011. I believe that's when the Oprah interview is from. No, I'm wrong. It's selected for Oprah's book club for April 2007.
Yeah.
And he says that, literally without his son, without thinking about, where he and his son would be in, if the whole world went to hell, right? It wouldn't be a book. It wouldn't have happened.
Right.
You can see it from reading it too. Like that's the one that gets me. That's the one that oh God, that's rough. I read it regularly, but that's still the darkest one for me.
The Road has I've said it before, Road has my favorite ending, I think, of any book, like the favorite last 2 paragraphs, or maybe any book ever.
Oh.
But and then The Road, he didn't write another book for what? It was 2006 till last year. The Passenger and Stella Maris came out together, right?
Yeah.
I haven't read those ones yet. I confess.
That was after by this time, he spent pretty much the rest of his life hanging out at the Santa Fe Institute, which is a nonprofit research center for various scientists in various fields. He's one of the only non-scientists there.
What was he doing there?
Just hanging out, shooting the shit with scientists, doing more writing and research, following up on his interests. Like he himself said that writing, as much of a passion as he has for writing, like it's so far down his list of just general interests. Like he's a big science guy, he's a big history guy, he's a big philosophy guy. And
The Passengers is about the atomic bomb, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
The Passenger. Yeah, have either of y'all read the 2 new ones yet?
No. I have not. No. I have The Passenger, but I'm not ready for it yet.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I'm not ready for it yet. But yeah, I have heard a lot of really, really good things.
Yeah, everybody liked it. Everybody liked both of them. So I'll read them. I was just curious. Josh, I feel like you would have mentioned if you had.
Yeah, no, I mean, Blood Meridian.
You already said this was your first McCarthy, so.
Yep, never read another word that he's written, but we picked some fantastic ones to start with, certainly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you have that, when does it say anything about the Sunset Limited when he wrote that?
Sunset Limited.
Yeah. Which was a play.
Oh yes.
And then HBO did a movie out of it with Sam L and Tommy Lee. And it was fucking incredible.
I think Sunset Limited premiered in 2006. I know, in Chicago.
So he had that running on the stage same year that he put out The Road.
Jeez,
wow, what a year!
Yeah. And then I'm looking at the movie. Yeah, I thought it was great. 2011, so the movie was 4 years afterwards.
Okay.
That's funny. It was Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson. It's a duo second collaboration after Rules of Engagement. and he wrote the screenplay as well.
Have y'all seen it? Have y'all?
I've not. I've not seen it.
Oh, it's
No, it's got to go on my list now.
Yeah,
Jacob,
yeah, we need to see it now.
you particularly, my friend, with your, your philosophies on religion and things. Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah, man.
right. It is right up your alley.
I gotta
It
see
is
it then.
so good. Yeah,
I'm
so
starring
good.
the page. I'm starring the
Just-
Wikipedia page, so I
Just
see it.
two dudes in a room talking. That's all.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
it. Just two dudes having a conversation. That's it. Oh my
Oh, yeah.
God, it's so good.
Oh, man,
Oh,
yeah, I
sounds
gotta do
brilliant.
that. I gotta watch that. But yeah,
Mhm.
and it seems that he wrote the screenplay as well as the play. So I mean, they're probably pretty similar based on my understanding of the movie. But
Yeah.
cool. And then he, Joss, you said he spent that time at the foundation and then passed away just a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah,
any
from
final stuff on that?
2014 to 2023. I mean, he lives, as I understand, pretty much the life that a lot of writers dream of living. Just surrounded by really interesting people in fields that you're interested in. And kind of absorbing that and eventually translating that into some kind of narrative. He died at his home on the 13th of June at the age of 89. Good long life, and with its ups and downs, certainly.
He did it. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
and
dude did it.
entirely on his own terms.
Yeah.
He didn't do email. He never voted because he said that poets shouldn't vote.
Do you know about the Cormac McCarthy Twitter hoax?
I was just about to say that. Yes.
Oh, go
yes.
ahead then. Go ahead.
There were a couple of hoax Twitter accounts in the past decade pretending to be him.
And a couple of them got verified. This is pre Elon Musk, when just anybody, any dipshit.
Well, yeah. There was a 2016 one as well where actually the USA Today picked this up. They tweeted that he died. And the origin of it happened to be some Italian guy who, does these hoaxes to make a point about social media misinformation. But yeah, like the way that his publisher, his agent were able to debunk the faux accounts pretending to be him in particular was they came out and said, look, he doesn't own a computer.
Yeah.
I had heard that dude, he hauled around a typewriter everywhere he went.
Which sold at auction in 2009 for $250,000.
Woo!
Wowza. So what did he write his last two books on, I wonder? Must have had to get another typewriter.
Maybe
he
another
did.
typewriter.
He went and bought an exact same one. I heard that story too. He went and bought the exact same one for like $40 at a pawn shop or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Do y'all know anything about the papers they were letting him do at the Santa Fe Institute, or like what he was there? There's the only one I know about is one of the most interesting, and it's just like a perfect bit of Cormac, like something that only he would think about and want to write about. And I could see the conversation, when he was talking to these physicists and stuff, told him about it, and they were like, dude, yes, write a paper on that right now, bro. Please.
Is it the one about like the unconscious mind and human
Yes.
language and how one is like one's constructed and the other is like not?
Yes. Very,
That's
very
interesting.
cool. Very, very interesting. Very interesting stuff. It was wild that he just, that's how he got to, spend his time. I'm just gonna think of cool shit, tell my genius friends about it, bounce it off them, and then write something cool about it.
Was that the Kekulé problem? Is that how you say it? Kekulé
Kekulé.
problem?
Yeah.
Kekulé?
Yeah,
That's what that
Kool-Aid.
was.
Kool-Aid man.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a few years ago, right? Like 2016, 2017?
It was a while back that I'd heard about it. I
That's
don't remember
cool.
all the details or, exact. I just remember sitting there like, what? How do you think of stuff like what are you doing, man? Like, because I remember when I seen it, all I'd known was that I didn't know anything about the Santa Fe Institute. I didn't know that he was just hanging out with those type dudes at the time. So I was just like, how does this dude, what is going on in this dude's head that he's, writing Blood Meridian and Child of God, and then now he's doing stuff like this? Like, what a brain, man.
Dude,
Oh, yeah.
this is funny to me. I just read this. I was looking up about the typewriter. I was interested in it, and get this. So the typewriter was auctioned in 2009 to raise money for the Santa Fe Institute. Get this. It says the auction house, and this comes from the New York Times. The auction house estimated it would fetch between 15,000 and 20,000. It sold for over 254,000, all money to Santa Fe. And McCarthy replaced it with an identical model bought for him by his friend John Miller for $11 plus $19.95 for shipping.
Okay, yeah. I said $40, so that was plus
Yeah.
the shipping and
So
whatnot.
it's funny. His friend John, quoting the New York Times, they originally said $11. He said, no. I also paid another $19.95 for shipping. You got to put that on it. They had to do a correction, and that is so funny to me. You know that's exactly the kind of guy I imagine hanging out with. Cormac McCarthy tells
Yep.
the New York Times, "Hey, you better note my $20 I put down for shipping."
Well, it's that's
Love that.
as I understand it, that's just kind of the guy he was. He said himself, I have this quote here: "Science is very rigorous. When you hang out with scientists and you see how they think, you can't do so without developing respect for it. And part of what you respect is their rigor. When you say something, it needs to be right. You can't just speculate idly about things."
Yeah. There you go.
Yep, that's how he gets down. That's wild.
Yeah, and that kind of
Wild dude.
translates into the Jacob, you were telling me about this earlier, right? The exactitude of his prose, right? The very careful selection of each word for its particular purpose and its place in the prose. Not unlike Lovecraft. That was the first thing I thought of.
Mhm.
Well, there are some similarities, I think, in the way that the landscapes are described. Yes, that I feel that in the very hyper precision. I mean, I do think I do like him a lot better, like his prose a lot better than Lovecraft's personally.
Yes,
But I get what you're saying with that.
well,
but
because
yeah,
he's not afraid to use words that have roots in languages other than Anglo-Saxon.
sure, yeah.
Right.
The last thing I wanted to do before we really get into talking about the book is, Josh, you already mentioned this was your first real experience with McCarthy. I'm sure you've heard of him plenty, but this was your first thing by him. Drew, if you wanted to talk a little bit, we know some of this, but if you wanted to talk a little bit about your background with McCarthy based on, and you mentioned it briefly about, where you come from and your relationship with his work, then that would be awesome.
Yeah, being from the Knoxville area, it's just like we were trailer park kids. None of us were particularly well read outside of the King James, and that might have been another reason why we why we gravitated toward him so much. But um, he we weren't really reading much, but he was the hometown hero, and like you hear stories, you meet people. He was so like popular, and there's so many people that know him around here. From just being that boy was running the roads. He was
The road.
all of them.
Sorry.
He did he lived, constantly doing cool shit and being around, you know, interesting people. And so like you'll see old heads all the time. Like I said before, some of them would be like, yeah, he could write and tell a story, but he wasn't worth the fuck anything else. Or, you'll hear, lots of stories, women around here, cause he was a bit of a tomcat. That's how he got down. But yeah, like it was just a thing that growing up here, you just knew like, we all knew that there was this sense of like there's nothing really here, and we don't really have a future as far as like we're all poor kids, but there's cool people that do cool shit that come from here. We would always, oh yeah, Tarantino's from here. He's the best at movies. That was back when I still thought that, but still, when you're a young kid in the trailer park and you got, Cormac McCarthy coming from the area, and all the old heads around you are always telling stories about him and the folk he run with. and the history of Knoxville, and then of course Suttree being set
Yeah.
in Knoxville, and those of us who ended up living on those same roads after the trailer park. There Suttree just hits for
Mm.
if you've been really, 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 really poor in this part of the world, then it speaks to you. It speaks to you real hard. And so that was kind of honestly what got me into reading stuff like that. I've been told, I needed to get into some Faulkner and things like that, but Cormac is what got me reading, other stuff like Toni Morrison and Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor. Like I was really, it graduated me. And that's why it's especially special to me. Because I feel like it just expanded not only was he a hometown hero, but I feel like it unlocked something in my brain. All I'd ever written before that was little, short stories and things like that. I never, I like screenplays and I like short stories, but that showed me like, oh nah, here's, this is a whole different kind of magic.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Flannery O'Connor, because I lived in Milledgeville for years, and that's the same relationship Milledgeville has with Flannery O'Connor. Milledgeville, Georgia, there's just not a whole lot to claim from Milledgeville, Georgia. There's a college there now that does pretty well, but it didn't used to. And but Flannery O'Connor, when she was alive, and now her grave, everybody they want to take you there. Everybody wants to talk about that. It's very similar energy to that. So I was thinking about that. But yeah,
absolutely.
To say my own relationship to his work, I've not read all of it. I don't have as deep of a relationship with it, but of course, coming from Tennessee, not the same region as Tennessee, but in Tennessee and Georgia, the Southeast, obviously having that, like, that Southern pride for the good writers that come from the South, some actual decent Southern pride, not the bullshit. That's all I'm talking about. Y'all know. But for some people that really know what they're talking about and really can get into that sort of American spirit in a sort of unique way that I think really writers from the South really can if they put their minds to it. And I'll say The Road was just, for me in high school, I was reading The Road. I read it probably the second half of the book. I'd read the first half, the second half of it. I read the whole thing at a wrestling tournament. I love this story. I was at a wrestling tournament because I was not like a WWE, like I was wrestling, doing high school wrestling. And these wrestling tournaments were like all day affairs, 10, 11, 12-hour affairs. You get there 8 a.m., you get out 9 or 10 because you're wrestling all day. And you wrestle maybe 3 times in the day, and you just kind of got to be ready. And I remember I read basically more than half of The Road at this wrestling tournament. And I remember I finished it, and I don't know how long I was basically just looking at a wall, but apparently my coach had to snap in my face and say, Jacob, you're up. And that was so funny to me, man. And for what it's worth, I did win that match. I
nice.
think that says less about me and more about the guy I was wrestling, but still, such a funny story to me. It's just like me at probably 15 years old, just staring at a wall, just like, holy shit, what did I just like deal with? And then all of a sudden getting snapped. My coach, he's like, what do you got there in your face? You got some comic books or something? Just. Oh man.
What it would do to your head being that age, reading that book, what it would do to your head in that moment, and then be like, oh, now I got to go throw somebody on the mat. Okay, I guess. Jesus.
Anyway, that's my main background, but I had not read Blood Meridian before this, and
okay.
I don't know how I missed it, but man, oh man, just incredible, really. But like, let's get into the book. I mean, there's a as always, we're not really as always, we're not if you want to read this book, and we highly encourage it, and you're worried about spoilers, it's a difficult book to spoil, but we're gonna go through the plot. I will say And it's the first thing I kind of wanted to ask about. The beginning of every chapter just tells you what's going to happen in the chapter. And I was interested, like it just at the beginning just has a list of events. And it's funny because sometimes you'll read the list of events and it's like, it's all this, it's like 12 pages. And sometimes it'll be like one sentence correlates to one thing. And sometimes the whole chapter will correlate to like one thing in there.
And then it'll be like, oh, this guy dies. And you're like, fuck.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I like that guy.
Whoa.
Yeah. Or like, I think like 4 or 5 times it just says the judge as like at the beginning, or like the judge speaks or something, which I think
Clinton and judge, the judge prestidigitant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it says the judge speaks or the judge gives a lesson, it's going to be an interesting chapter.
About to get some shit.
I'm interested right off the bat. What do y'all think about that?
I was gonna say, do y'all outline? You talking about how the chapters are done like that with that sort of outline list at the beginning? Do y'all outline it all when you write?
Oh yeah,
that's what it seems like to me. I know some people just don't fool with it at all. A lot of people just don't fool with it but that's what it seems like to me. That was like his outline or whatever, and he was just like, fuck it, that's what I'll title the chapters or you know what I'm saying? Like he had all these the things that he wanted to cover. The basic points that he wanted to cover for every chapter, and then he was just like, name the chapters, I'll just put this up there.
It's interesting, like, because the way I kind of saw it is like, yeah, I agree it's something along those lines, but I think it's also a sort of a situation where you're going into it and it's like, it's not about the plot in the sense of like, ooh, what's gonna happen. Like the book basically is just like, they're all gonna die, dude. Like at the beginning.
Yeah, you know it.
Like they're all gonna, like, and also if you know your history, like it's just a bloodbath. Like it's just like if you know anything about the history of it at all. And these characters, a couple of them are based on maybe real people, but like I just mean the history of the region.
Right.
You just know like there is no good outcome here. Nobody's walking away clean. Really nobody's walking away at all except for the judge, which we'll talk about. I mean, he's dancing away, but
he's dancing.
Always dancing.
But yeah, the book is essentially it opens up with, I guess, our protagonist, though there's chapters at a time where he just kind of like he gets mentioned like twice, but you got the kid and he never has a name. McCarthy likes to do that, does the same thing in The Road. With the father and son, but you got the kid, and he's a young man. He's sort of I guess protagonist, pseudo protagonist. He's this Tennessean. His mother died in childbirth, and he's what is he, 13 or 14 years old, and he flees to Texas.
14,
yeah.
And we don't really know much about, like, I mean, what we know about him is he's just he's a bad kid. He comes from a bad home. He's poor. He has nothing better to do than first go to New Orleans and then to Texas, and he just sort of leaves violence in his wake. He's a shit kid and was raised to be a shit kid, but he's real good. He's really good at fighting. He's really good at killing people when he needs to. He never gets called anything but the kid until the end when they just call him the man when he's an adult.
But yeah, it is interesting how it sets that up in the beginning. It kind of, because it breezes through a lot of stuff. But like the things it makes a point to establish, you know what I mean? In that first little bit, he, engages in violence and feels himself vindicated. Mentioned of introduction to racism, obviously, being a big part of his world. These things are like set right in the beginning. But again, even what I think is really interesting is like you're told about the kid's violence.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing him participate in it. You're not seeing him as as he's actually doing it. So there's this weird little disconnect with the kid and the violence. And that's like 3 things that get established like right there off the rip that I feel like are super important to the whole thing throughout.
If I'm right, the first time he does violence is it when he like gets in his fight with Toadvine? Maybe.
Yeah. So and even then, he's not
the instigator in that situation.
He's always depicted as just doing what he has to do to protect himself from the violence,
Mhm.
and there's and it's still never, talked about as he's actually doing it. You never actually see him do it. And it makes it really, really, really a lot more interesting, in my opinion.
I mean, I think he even sees everything he does in the whole novel as like, oh, well, it's just kind of what I got to do, man. Like, he doesn't have this like will to violence in the same way some of the other characters do. Like, don't get me wrong, like he's like a nasty son of a bitch, but like he doesn't have this like the way Holden or Glanton like or Toadvine
Right.
or any of them are like, let's go get him, let's whatever. Like he'll shoot, he'll stab, he'll be there. He's
Yeah.
at a lot of incidents where it's not really clear who did the killing, but like it was probably him. But
Yep.
like he's just kind of like he almost feels like, and it's hard to get in his head, but he's kind of a passive observer almost of his own life.
Yep.
And that's not to say that he's not guilty of doing horrible, awful things, but that he is just like the sort of cast off riffraff of this country that the country builds and makes with the intention of shipping off west to go fight these battles. Like it's
Yep.
all there's an assembly line of little kids getting sent off to Texas to go fight and die.
Yeah,
and
and
just drown our enemies in blood.
yeah, before and after, because I mean, I'm just looking at the first paragraph here, right? The outside lie dark turned fields with rags of snow and darker woods beyond that harbor yet a few last wolves. Which I mean, you get the sense. I mean, I'm glad that y'all brought up his origins early on and how that kind of skews things, right? Because you get a sense that he's born in the ashes of this battle that's kind of been fought to establish where he is, because before it was fighting wolves, before it was taming the very wilderness, right? And for somebody who has a taste for mindless violence from a very early age, right? The question is, okay, well, if not here, where is he going to find his fight?
Right.
And I mean, and it's also, you said that, the violence already is established in where he lives. I mean, it's also worth noting this takes place, I mean, essentially immediately after the Mexican-American War.
Yeah.
Like in the immediate aftermath, which is an interesting choice. You'd think off the time period, it's like, okay, it's a book about the Mexican-American War, but talks about it basically none.
Yeah.
Despite it's of course it's an ever-present thing. But it's interesting. McCarthy isn't choosing a distinct period of violent outbreak. He's not choosing the Mexican-American War. He's not choosing the Civil War. He's not even choosing any specific like periods of large engagement between colonialists and American Indians, right? Like he's not even picking like one of the big incidents we put in our head. Because like the way just people think is like we like to break things down as isolated incidents. We like to be like, okay,
that's a great point. Yeah.
There was the French and Indian War. That was one of our fights with the American Indians. And there was Wounded Knee. That was one of our fights. But McCarthy is like, no, man. This went on every day for 200, 300 years.
Yes.
That's what he really wants you to remember is he goes, every day it's just another thing of bodies. And they just got their blood laid on the sand. And as it even describes later in the book, the sun made it as if it had never been there before. And this was every day. This isn't a special day. This is just another day in Texas.
You just said that. Yeah. This is not a special day. This is not and I think there's that's, a lot of people complain about the monotony of this book, the monotony of the violence. But I think that is on purpose because of what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like the whole goal was to put like reality to the violence, and get rid of all the pomp and circumstance and show that it's just everyday shit that becomes completely for those, who engage in it regularly, and people just turn into meat and receipts.
And then
there was a guy online who complained. He said, why did this, and it was just some dumbass, but he said, like, why does this book not mention the Alamo once? And I was like,
excuse me, what?
I thought that was the funniest, unintentionally funniest
The
thing.
Alamo
I
that
was like, man,
happens, what, this is 11, 12 years hence? Like,
it's like he was doing it like it needs to be like out of respect for our brave troops or whatever. It's like, dude, you think
Dude.
McCarthy gives a shit about your brave troops
and talk about
fighting at
missing the
Alamo?
points, like
Yeah.
so comprehensively. Like, because I mean,
Insane.
because that's the thing. Like, it's any the judge says at one point, I'm thinking right now, and this is skipping ahead a whole hell of a lot, but he says that, look, the mystery of life, the mystery of the universe is that there is no mystery,
Mhm.
right? Any kind of meaning that you kind of overlay on any kind of narrative that makes sense of it all, it's in retrospect, and it's, you can't make sense of your own mind, right? Because your own mind is all you have to make sense of it with, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so, and that's the thing, right? To set it during the war, I think is, well, I'll come at it from a different perspective, right? To set it after the war is to sort of put the lie to any idea of there being an after, right?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because the border is not established. The frontier is still very porous and kind of fuzzy, and to the degree that colonization has come to this land, it's still very much authority is still very much in flux, and the West hasn't quote unquote been won yet. And those who, and indeed, it's often described as an anti-Western because, again, it sort of puts the lie to the fact that that anything can be won.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at the time when it came out, that was when the big hero westerns were coming out, like
Mhm.
were really popular. If you were reading westerns, you were reading, your the big hero stuff, the stuff that was, made to be. And this is my favorite thing about Cormac stories altogether, is that real life is not tied up nice and tight. It's not, there's no story arc in real life. It's just a series of events.
Mhm.
Like it just, this is what happened. It's not gonna wrap up nice and neat for you, or whatever. And again, it goes back to, why he said it when he did, the and the place that he said it in. It's just like you couldn't. He was. It seems to me he was really trying hard to be like, hey, that silly hero Western bullshit. I promise you it wasn't like that. I promise you it
Mhm.
wasn't like that. I'll write you a book that what the West was really like, and you're not gonna like it. That to me, that's the way it feels.
One thing that I think is interesting, and you're talking about, it's not like nothing's framed nicely, or nothing's framed in like perfect time periods, exactly how much time, exactly where's what,
Yeah.
exactly where does this tie into history, it dances around. And even moments where people in the novel, and it gives a couple years, but even moments in the novel where people point out like, oh, well, it says he was, it says the kid was born during the Leonid's meteor shower, right? In
Yeah.
1833. And the
Mhm.
funny thing is that about that is, and this took me a little bit of looking, but that's actually a reference to a William Faulkner novel. He's referencing the novel Go Down Moses when he references the 1833 meteor shower.
Whoa.
And it's
Really?
about, because that's the same night that a slave, like this slave in that same novel dies, that he would have been reading
Huh.
around the same time. And he uses the exact same language in one of the quotes of like of the in him quoting about the why our stars fell. It's like an exact same quote. So even that,
Huh.
he's like doing this framing off of this other like literary tradition, and also this like history of slavery. You were talking about the violence that gave birth to him. You can almost literally see it as the kid was born out of the blood
Yeah.
of like slave violence on his.
Mhm.
Damn. That's
Hell yeah.
crazy.
And if there isn't just layers to that shit, dude,
God damn, dude.
it's too good, man.
It's too good.
Like,
Oh
Honestly, it
yeah.
pisses me off sometimes. I ain't gonna
yeah.
lie.
That is one hell of a baptism. Holy, I can't believe you
Mhm.
found that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
that's cool.
I
Good,
had to
good
like,
shit.
I didn't like, because I had thought I had heard that quote somewhere else. I went down and then I realized on the whatever. But anyway, yeah. But like
Wow.
but it founds your point so well, as like, it's even history is like a set piece here, like he's
Yeah.
moving around like action figures to make a point. It's not
Yeah.
like he picked out some characters like Glanton and Judge Holden, not because of what they did or didn't do, even though these were presumably some real outlaws, but because they fit right into the right moment, just like he's fit in this meteor shower because it works both historically and literarily. But it all kind of locks together in this interesting way.
Yeah, that is
Hmm.
really cool.
And none of it's by accident, that's for sure.
Nope.
He was sitting in that stone hut behind a supermarket, just racking his brain to make everything just this perfect puzzle, going crazy because he hated the place he was staying in, and just like putting all his spite into this crazy ass
Mouthful of beans.
Yes, exactly right. Just chewing, mad as hell. Exactly right. But yeah. Plot wise, so we have we even gotten to him meeting the judge? I don't think we have.
I was just
Well, he
thinking about the
sees him.
judge
He
when
sees him.
Talked about it. Like the judge, he meets the judge first at that like church hall or that church tent, right?
there's like a revival going on, yeah, and
Mhm.
and the judge steps up, right, and he points at the reverend and he says, "Hey, this guy's guilty of bestiality. This guy's guilty of raping children. All this, that, and the other horrible thing." And then this dude gets run out of town.
Yep. And it turns out like the judge was just like making shit up. Like he just
Mhm.
and he by his own admission.
I
and
never
he's-
laid eyes on the man before today. Never even heard of him.
and the people who drove the guy out of town start laughing when they heard that. Like they're just like, "Oh man, you got us." And it's like that dude's somewhere tarred and
Jesus.
feathered. Like, but the judge is interesting. He's described as a 7-foot tall, pale, hairless man, like literally hairless, not just on his head, but like when he's naked, like just not a hair on his body. Dude's got this huge like smile, like he's strong as hell. Like there's even a part in it where he's like picks up a meteor ore, and like even his own guys are like, "There's no way he can throw that thing." He throws it like 10 feet. Like
Oh
he's
yeah.
supernatural. I mean, we could say he's supernatural. To what extent is a little unclear, but he is very well spoken, very grammatically sharp. Got this deep, strong voice. Kind of imagining like almost like a James Earl Jones or like a something like that. This deep, powerful
Yeah.
voice, and he's good at just about everything. He's like perfect at everything. Really speaks every language, knows everything, analyzes everything, is obsessive. He can dance. He can play music. He knows law. It's not really clear what he's the judge of until a lot later. He can kill. He can kill really effectively. He can do magic tricks. I mean, like the dude knows everything about everything.
He knows geology. He
Yeah.
knows, weather and
He's a
all
chemist.
the. Yeah, he's a chemist. He knows the ins and outs about the native peoples.
Mhm.
Fluent in
The
Spanish.
politics and yeah. Like it's he does it
Yeah.
all.
When people try and people like note that, like the pastor or the ex pastor like even talks about him like in a fearful way. He's like, I don't know. He says the man shoots better than anyone I've ever met, but he can dance and play like the fiddle. Like I don't know what we're looking at right now. Like this guy's a freak.
Yeah,
and
like
the
he's
effect,
he
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no. He's like Uncle Fester playing Lurch with like Gomez's personality.
There you go.
I don't
There's a
know
lot
why
going
Adam's
on.
Family just popped into my head.
There is it's interesting. Like a lot of like they've got. I mean, there's been a lot of failed film adaptations of this in the sense that they've tried to make a movie and it's not happened. There was famously Ridley Scott was going to make a movie of this and it didn't happen. And they're working on one now. And me and Josh were saying the other day, who the hell do you get to play Judge Holden? And I didn't.
Dude,
I
Dave
really,
Bautista, I'm telling you.
I mean, maybe, but like maybe.
You know what?
Let's see.
Bautista does got some chops. I ain't gonna act like he don't got chops, but
Blade Runner 2049, he kind of surprised me with that quiet. I mean,
he's
he
got
dies
he's got
pretty quick,
chops. But
we'll see.
D'Onofrio, it was maybe, but I think he might be too old now. But a younger D'Onofrio, muscled up a little bit, I think could do it. D'Onofrio gets weird. He knows how to get weird.
Mhm.
So that would have been my guess. That would be my
Honestly, just
one I put
like
forward.
bring back Javier Bardem from playing Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. Just shave him.
Just shave him.
be good enough for that. But yeah, no. So you've got, and the judge is really this other vital character because he's just kind of always around. He's this supernatural feeling figure. Whether he literally is or isn't, you can decide that yourself. But he is this figure of this just deep, unsettling evil that sits over this novel. And so the kid, after this, he doesn't know what to do. He ends up falling in with this ex-professional soldier, Captain White. He's like an American supremacist, and he's like, we got to conquer Mexico, as if they didn't just steal like half of Mexico. He's basically the kind of guy who says like one of the like Gulf War veterans who was like, if we had only gone further, or the Vietnam veterans who said if we'd only dropped the atomic bomb, like if we'd only done a little more, it was those libs in Washington that stopped us from winning. He's like that, but for like the 19th century. And he puts together just this gang of real freaks to basically try and go take back Mexico with just like a few guys.
Yeah,
and it goes about as well as you'd expect.
Which and that's we should stress, like back then that was something people actually did. That's what filibustering meant originally.
Yeah.
Was you get a bunch of lowlifes together and you go off and you carve out a fiefdom and then you turn around and swear allegiance to the United States. William Walker was the most famous of these guys. He was briefly president of Nicaragua. Famously the only American to ever become head of state of another country, and
William Walker,
way to do it. William Walker,
Nicaragua.
Yes.
Jesus,
it doesn't sound like he belongs there. I gotta say,
no.
Oh no, he kind of walked in there and just didn't walk out.
But yeah,
that is important to the whole like setting in general, like just the mindset of the time, and it would have been totally understandable for a boy from the volunteer state, you know what I mean? Like this is what you're still being told back east. This is, and honestly, I'd say the longest part of history. And still to this day for poor kids, like you were saying before, it's just like you better take some war and somewhere, buddy, and make something in this world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly what they did, and it's interesting the difference. Or because you've already been introduced to this figure of the judge or whatever, and not really knowing much about him, but Captain White is and his mission, what he's doing is put in a very obviously like this boy's biting off more than he can chew type of light. You see him as like running on ignorance, and especially being a modern audience, you're like, this fucking dude.
Have y'all if I think that this would be a good time, has anyone got it as their quote? Because I don't want to steal it if not, but if not, I was going to read the quote from the Mennonite before they go on their doom
go
mission.
ahead,
that was my second choice.
Okay, if it's not your first choice, I've got a first choice already, but I'm going to read this just because it's worth going.
Hit it.
Just for context, before they go on this doomed quest, they come across this guy at the saloon. The kid and a few of his friends, and he's just looking at him basically. And he says, the Mennonite watches the enshadowed dark before them as it is reflected to him in the mirror over the bar. He turns to them. His eyes are wet. He speaks slowly. The wrath of God lies sleeping. It was hid 1,000,000 years before men were, and only men have power to wake it. Hell ain't half full. Hear me. Ye carry a war of a madman's making onto a foreign land, you'll wake more than the dogs. That's
fucking
then
good.
and before the night is out, one of those three guys is dead. The Mennonite just kind of gives him a tip of his hat and walks away.
Yep. That's such a great scene, man. Such a great scene.
You'll wake
Incredible.
more than the dogs. That's so good. And the dogs do remain important in the rest of the book. So.
They do. And as does that philosophy, that thing, that theme, that is it right there. It's there's always going to be the motherfuckers taking that war, and they're always going to find They're always going to find some version of it, and most of the time they're not going to like what they find.
Wonder why they chose Mennonite. I guess it doesn't really matter, but
That is
it just
interesting, isn't it? I don't know if it's one of those things like he just an interesting, denomination you don't hear about very often, or what. I don't know. I've wondered that too.
I mean, they do tend to be known as pacifists, I guess, or the Anabaptists do. So I guess it's that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I guess that's just where it comes from. And
It's also, I wonder, because you do it is the sort of person that you see, because the Mennonites they kind of dress old timey, right? They go around in horse and carriage and whatnot. It's interesting to me that you would see this sort of person in this time, and you'd see them today, and there would be some and there would be some stability, right? There would be some continuity in terms of what you would see back then or back now. So then the question becomes, okay, well, how did that stick around, right? How did it's the sort of person perhaps who didn't focus on going out and making his bones in the desert, killing people or being killed.
That's a good point.
The people who survived.
Wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. You're getting that bit of wisdom, from the exact type of person that, is the reason that they're
takes his own advice.
That reference would still hit with a modern audience, who still see Mennonites at the same way. That's a really good point. I never thought about that.
So I just looked it up, and there's a decently sized presence still for what Mennonite sects still exist in El Paso, Texas. So it's very possible he was just interacting with folks like that while he was writing the novel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That popped into my head, and I was like, you know what? I bet. And I looked it up, and yeah, there's a handful out there, and a handful is more than there is in most places.
Right.
But yeah, to move it along, I mean, and the reason is a lot of this plot is very as it gets toward the middle, it kind of becomes more mushy in a more intentional way, like we were talking about, in a repetitive sort of way of slaughter after slaughter. But just to talk about what happens next, the kid rides out with this group of filibusters, and I mean they don't even make contact with Mexicans. They lose immediately to Native Americans. They plan to just like steal from some random people, and these people are hanging on the backs of horses. There's hundreds of horses riding. They're hanging on the backs of them, so you don't see them. They just look like wild horses. And they pop up and just nail them. I mean, just quick as you please. Just down.
Comanches are still to this day regarded as some of the greatest horse archers in human history, right? And they're coming up on these guys on foot, like. So you see that, you're laughing immediately because you know exactly how it's going to go.
I don't even know that they had crossed the border out of Texas at that point. They were close. If they were,
they ranged all over Texas, New Mexico, further.
No, I meant the filibuster group was trying to invade Mexico. I don't know that they'd left Texas by the time they died. I'm not even sure they made it to the border.
They didn't get very far, I don't think.
Yeah.
Texas was still barely, like the west of it basically was unsettled, or not what white civilization would have called settled.
Right.
And
I mean, there had just been this war here too. I mean, it's pretty. But
before that, it talks about it. There had been war there even before the war that just happened. There was war. There was war. And then before, it is a place that is hard. That's just the way that you've got to be hard to live there, especially back then. I don't go to the desert. I will not go to the desert. Never.
Yeah.
I have no place in the desert because there's no fucking water there. But I can imagine, already you're a killer, whatever. You're a shady dude. Spend some time out there for a little while. Or if you're just somebody struggling to live, you know what I mean? After a while of living out there, you are going to develop traits that are very hard.
If you're
you
a
have
normal
to.
guy, you turn into a bad guy. If you're a bad guy, you turn into a guy who wears ears around his neck, like some of the
It's
characters
just
do.
it's hard, hard living, hard to survive. You have to kill shit on the
Yeah,
race.
and you have the kid after this battle just struggling, trying to find water. You have these just brutal. There's a lot of real brutal descriptions of this it's very beautiful landscape, but it's just knife hard. It's interesting.
Yep.
It's like the same landscape that gets very beautiful depictions for honestly well provisioned characters and all the pretty horses get much more harsh depictions for these characters that are poorly provisioned and in such an intense situation. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, I thought it was interesting. Like a thing I wrote down because I just thought it was an interesting quote, right? Like a description of the desert. And this is just a group of them riding in the sun. It says, they rode on, and the sun in the east flushed pale streaks of light, and then a deeper run of color like blood, seeping up in sudden reaches, flaring plain-wise, and where the earth drained up into the sky at the edge of creation, the top of the sun rose out of nothing like the head of a great red phallus, until it cleared the unseen rim and sat squat and pulsing and malevolent behind them. The shadows of the smallest stones lay like a pencil lines across the sand, and the shapes of the men and their mounts advance elongate before them like strands of the night from which they'd ridden, like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. And it's just like the word choice is insane.
You didn't have to do that.
Yeah, but it works so well. Like I see it,
Yes.
They're getting fucked by the sun, like literally.
Yep. But the themes, like all of it, and so many times in those kind of descriptions, it'll be calling back to the themes from before, or drawing the accuracy of the adjectives, giving you the reminding you of things that he was making a point about, these figures going out into this thing, the black tentacles reaching out into this landscape. Like, it's just when you know what they're going out there doing, you know what I'm saying? Like, it makes perfect sense. The accuracy on and those kinds of, you think it's just, oh, he's just trying to paint a cool picture, but it ain't just that. Like, there's
also later on, a few chapters later on, you have the judge give a speech about everything is tied to things, everything is tethered if they're tentacled. And he says, I've got this coin, heavenly bodies do it, and so do men. And it's the same way. You've got these tendrils that are tying them backward.
Yep.
Every man tabernacled on every other, he in exchange, and so on, in an endless complexity of being and witness to the uttermost edge of the world.
Exactly right,
man. Ah, damn. Yeah, that old boy can say it. He knows how to say it.
So yeah, the kid ends up getting falling in he falls into the village. He gets taken prisoner by the Mexican army and basically gets turned over to this gang of desperados led by none other than John Joel Glanton. The way he's okay, we mentioned it briefly earlier, but there's this guy named Toadvine that the kid got in a fight with back in the day. They both kind of lost the fight, and there was like sort of, I guess, a mutual respect that Toadvine developed. The kid doesn't seem to really care one way or another, but Toadvine gets him out of the scrape, and they're going to work on this gang of people that are contracted to hunt down American Indians. They're basically getting paid by the scalp, and particularly to hunt down like different leaders of like particular like value. They're outlaws, they're bounty hunters, but they're kind of privateers for different cities and stuff. Whoever's going to pay them, they're gonna kill for them.
Yeah, and like notably, the last time we've seen Toadvine, I think, is sorry to cut you off. Once he and the kid have kind of skipped town, right? And they skipped town because Toadvine had this grudge he was settling of some indeterminate nature with a guy, and he woke him up by lighting a fire in his room at the tavern he was staying at. And then the whole thing just kind of burns down and they book it. That's how he solves problems.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about when he's talking about old brass teeth,
Mm.
especially if you've been locked up, that you pick out one of the COs and you're like, God damn, I hope I get it. I hope I can get him. I hope I can get along with him one good
Mm-hmm.
time. You know
1
what I mean?
minute.
Like,
1 minute.
yeah, just give me just a minute if I can catch him in the cut. Ain't nobody around. And it's so fucking relatable. The
Yeah.
way somebody's like, yeah, and I'm gonna get them gold teeth, and it's gonna fetch me a pretty penny. That's
Yeah.
just that I know. I feel like one of Cormac's homies for running the roads here in Knoxville. That was inspired, but I know dudes like that.
Yeah.
But I was, yeah, I grew up with dudes like that.
It's worth noting too, Toadvine, he's one of the, like, there's some ugly dudes in this novel, but Toadvine's described as having brands, and he's described as having no ears, just a real ropey black hair, just a
Wild
real,
looking dude.
he's really seen it. The adventures of Toadvine before this are probably just as bad as everything
Oh
that
God,
happened here.
Man, I've
That'd
watched
probably
The
be an
Adventures of
interesting.
Toadvine.
Huh,
Yep,
shoot, yeah.
absolutely.
But yeah, so they sort of become this group that they're following this guy, John Joel Glanton. He's the American leader, the captain of this gang of scalp hunters. And Judge Holden has sort of been taken on as his lieutenant. They find out later that Judge Holden, he fell in with them when they were about to die, and he basically taught them how to make gunpowder out of just different materials in the earth and stuff. And he did some like borderline like alchemy shit, like some like borderline dark magic.
Sulfur,
That
saltpeter, and
is
charcoal.
that is. I mean, that is though. That's fucking alchemy, bro.
Yeah.
The way he did it on a
Oh, yeah.
volcano. Yeah.
Yeah, the volcano, and he's pouring it. And,
Piss on these rocks. Trust me, it'll work.
yeah. And
What
the
a
judge,
great
this is the
scene.
second time the kid has seen him, and it notes later on that everybody in the gang somewhere in their life had encountered the judge before they became part of this gang, which I thought was notable.
I think that is very notable because he's very careful throughout with the supernatural stuff with the judge.
Mm-hmm.
And because how he designed the character, he made him capable of a lot of things that would seem supernatural to us.
Right.
Like a man can learn a bunch of languages. A man can know all that stuff. A man can play the fiddle and dance and practice law and know how to make gunpowder by pissing on a volcano. That's doable. A man can be big and super strong. The thing about every person there swears they met him before is, I think, one of the most, like, the strongest. He really goes at that supernatural claim, but the way he goes about it, to put it out there like he is supernatural, but the way he puts it out there is that you hear about it secondhand from people just being, oh yeah, everybody says they've seen him before.
In fact, the ex-priest, basically, when the kid says, yeah, I've seen before, the ex-priest is kind of like, yeah, bullshit, man, whatever.
Exactly.
Everybody says that.
Yeah. So,
and in his own head, he's like, yeah, I'm the only one that's met him before.
Right. It's so interesting. I think it was very deliberate to do that. And it's something I always come back to, because there's, the big debate on, is he the devil? Like that's one of the things I always come back to. That's one of the things that was really stretching that, because everything else is somewhat plausible for the most
other
part.
thing that it ties to is he tells a story at one point that it seems to mess with a lot of the guys. Like, a lot of the guys, like, it ties to something in their own lives.
Yeah.
And I find that to be another interesting point.
That's
where
a good
he's
point.
got this insight. But then again, you could say, well, maybe he's a keen listener. He wove a story together that would get under all their skin,
And he's been traveling with these dudes for a while now. He's got them. That he's definitely a dude that just, he has all the skill set to enthrall men.
Honestly, if you think about it, I'll bet you, I won't bet you, but I could see Cormac McCarthy, half the reason he just didn't want to take interviews is he's like, I don't want to answer who the judge is. And that's all they're going to ask me.
I could see that.
For years after this book, all they're going to ask him. All right, so Judge Holden.
Yeah. What exactly went on here? Because I mean, there is a lot of that. There's a lot that's another thing that I love about this book.
And there is a lot going on. And then the character of Glanton, I think at first you don't see it, but they describe it at one point as like kind of insane, or mad is the word they use. He's not mad in the sense he's just like a stark raving lunatic, but he is a guy that has somehow, and we know he's a veteran of previous wars and stuff. He really is like, he's just like a complete sociopath. Like he has nothing, and not like born a sociopath. Like he is a guy who has like molded himself into a sociopath, like through decision after decision. He is like the biblical Pharaoh who chose to harden his heart. Like, he is like in that way. Like he has been made that, and he is a captain of the American military. He fought in the Mexican-American War, won respect, whatever that means, doing that. We know the dude is a damn good fighter. I mean, with these old ass guns, he's doing shots from like 200 yards.
Oh yeah, he's calling the Indians' moves as they make them.
Yeah, he's quick, he's whatever, and he's like, he is so he's kind of your like ultimate killer or whatever. And it's interesting because the judge, he's like a guy that you'd think the judge would like have problems like taking second fiddle to, but the judge really doesn't ever seem to have a problem, and he doesn't really undermine Glanton. He just, because Glanton's kind of already doing what the judge wants to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's another thing that I think is really interesting about the dynamic of the gang. Again, at every turn, Cormac this is not your Western that you've read before. You know what I mean? Like, because is Glanton calling the shots, or is the judge influencing him in every little thing that he does? And that's up to you to decide, really. And like because they both understand the game, but they both understand the game of what it is. And Glanton is like military racist, he's like, whereas the judge is like college educated, I got my calipers out racist.
Yeah, he's doing like a weird, like, yeah.
You and me were like the other day, is the judge a liberal? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Again, like, it's very because that's one thing you get a lot of, and most mentions of Glanton, his racism is a big part of who he is. Like that's and I'm surprised that I don't hear people talk about the racial dynamics in Blood Meridian more.
Yeah, and that was the thing I wanted to get into at a certain point. And it's worth pointing out.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, there is literally a white versus black story in this fucking thing, straight up. You know what I mean? Like told. I mean, it's just you rarely hear folks talk about it. I've heard a few people talk about it, but it's one of the things about Glanton that if you're going to talk about Glanton, you really it informs everything about his character. What he sees everybody that ain't white as,
that
savages.
particular,
That's it, straight up. And it don't matter what brand they are, they all get called the same thing,
Yeah.
And
he's even sus on Bathcat because he's from Wales. Like, he's looking at him. He's like, all right, he's a Welsh guy. I'm not so sure about, like, he's advanced racist, like
hard, on that next level shit.
And the book is like, it's notable that the way McCarthy writes is as thought and prose and even dialogue are blended together. Like, he's not using quotation marks, and he's not using italics to say this is a thought, and he's not even very often saying he thought this. It's all just kind of this soup almost that he throws everything together. And you got to figure out, sometimes you got to pull out what's a word, what's a thought, what's a this, what's a that. So a lot of his prose is like happening. It's the characters' heads are coloring like the perception. So when the prose can refer to, Native people as savages, it can use slurs, it can use this kind of stuff because it is like colored by the brains of these characters. Like, and it's even shown to not always be accurate. Sometimes it'll go, there's one part where it says there were 5 thistles in the bush. No, 7 thistles on the bush. Like, how often do you have a narrator, like a third person omniscient narrator, say correct itself? It's happened multiple times in the book. It is all colored by the weird soup of these people's brains, and everybody who's in focus on screen, if this were a movie, is kind of just their collective psyche is sort of forming this. It's not one narrator, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not the kid. The kid is certainly not, especially later on, certainly not the main mind this is being drawn from, which I find interesting.
It mixes in Spanish as well.
Yes, a lot.
Which, you know, if you don't speak Spanish, it might be disorienting at first, you know. And,
to be fair, most of it's like pretty basic.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you know, for even the stuff that's not, I feel like, and I'm working on distant memory of high school Spanish here, but I feel like you can kind of infer it from context clues once you get immersed enough in it. You know,
even
which
if you don't know what they're saying, it says, okay, then he gestured at the horse and he brought the horse over, you know?
Right.
But you just said it. It I don't know. For me, it feels like it makes the immersion easier.
I agree.
You know, like it when you don't have the quotations and you don't have all the extra stuff that's separating these things. Oh, this is what somebody's saying. This is what somebody's thinking. Like you said, with this soup, the soup is more immersive to me. You know, because of that, and it seems more realistic. You know, because of the language it uses in that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, it's a thing that you can't thumb through, you know, you kind of got to, well, you can, but like, it's very difficult. You know, you got to bring a lot of yourself and a lot of your own mind, and you got to reckon with the work, which I think is a sign a lot of times of great literature. Not that there's anything wrong with more poppy stuff that you could fold. We both liked, Joss and I both liked Gideon the Ninth. You would kind of fly through Gideon the Ninth, the book we read. This book, though, you gotta like, you kind of got to put a little bit of your soul into it, like, and which also makes you kind of have to come away with this, like, you know, you've put your brain into the muck that is this book, and you've got like some of that muck sticking to you, and you kind of got to work through it and think through it. The words of the judge are echoing in your ears, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it.
It's like, I read somebody who just was like, who described Cormac McCarthy. Oh, it was I think it was David Foster Wallace writing about this book in his essay in the 90s. He called this book haunted. And I can really feel that.
Not haunting, haunted.
Haunted. Yeah.
No, as in there is a ghost, and it, like, it's following you home. It's in the room. Right? And I absolutely see that. It's 100%. And I also wanted one more thing on the sort of not that it can't come back up, but on the, like, his decisions with language and the decision to, you know, go for it. And he does use slurs, he does whatever, like I think it's interesting. It reminds me of a teacher I had in college, right? Professor I had in college, and we were talking about books, and there was this student, and I won't say his name in case whatever someone knows who he is. He was a real piece of work, but he said to his teacher, and he was real mad that he had an essay rejected, and he said, "You can't write anything anymore." And the teacher looked, and he goes, "You can write anything if it's good. Like, you're allowed to say whatever you want if it's good." And I thought that was so true.
Yep.
And he made that point. I'm like, Cormac McCarthy, like, people aren't like, because the intent is clear, you know, like,
right, exactly.
And to be clear, this student, and I mean, if someone was in this class, they'll know who I'm talking about, said was mad because he wrote an essay about why there are no good girls anymore and nobody would publish it, and he was mad about that. And it's like, well, maybe what you're writing sucks, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And like, that was what the professor, like, you know, while being professional, kind of told him, you know, like, he was like, man, like, I don't know what to tell you, like, you know, he's like, I so like, it was and I came back to that thinking about this book.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I wonder if that's part of what we've been talking about with why Cormac didn't, you know, want to explain any of this stuff. You know, he didn't want to have to answer. He's like, yes, I wrote it like that. I use those words because that is the way it was. That is the reality. You know, this is the way most white people talked. But you know, they would have been in that situation.
Yes.
This is the way they were. They're,
yes.
If I'm going to put you, and that's a problem you have with other Westerns. It's like, oh, good thing we're following the only non-racist former Confederate in this Western.
Yeah, like, the good old Lone Ranger who would never speak ill of, like, come on.
Yeah, the honorable, you know, former Confederate general in you know, the remake of Magnificent Seven, right?
Oh,
who, you know, never said a slur, you know, and even though he fought for that one side.
Ridiculous.
And that's the thing, like, it's it's the brutality that this book is shot through with, and it's what men are capable of descending to in this context and in this territory, right? There is a context to these sorts of things, right? And there is a way of looking at the world and of looking at people who are fundamentally different from you in such a way that they are no longer rendered as people in your thinking. And it's in that context that you can, double fist babies and slam them against the ground until they die.
Yep.
Mhm.
I mean, go ahead.
He like go ahead. Sorry, I'll let that cook for a
I was
second.
just gonna say, when you the things you can descend to, what men are capable of in that in that realm, but also the how we're sort of the monotony of it, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Yes,
the
the
just
banality.
yeah, and yeah, it feels like the place has a lot to do with it, obviously, and the backgrounds. I guess I'll say the quote that I picked.
Hmm.
It, it fits here, so I'll just go ahead and say it. It's real simple, 2 words: darkness implacable. I think
Mm.
is the best sentence
Hmm.
in this. It's just a 2 word sentence, and it's so perfect. It's because it's a part of that main theme of you know what eh, if you are somebody who lives in a place where you feel you are at war all the time,
Hmm.
Mm.
what that does to your brain. And like I think that was one of the main reasons why it of course it doesn't compare, but the me and the trailer park kids that I grew up with, a lot of us were homeless. I was homeless before I finished high school. My best buddy Savage homeless not too long after, on the run from the law.
Hmm.
All of us, during the opioid crisis is when we were in high schools, like the biggest part of it. And
Mm.
all of us were living on the street, selling dope, committing violence on a regular basis. Because and it was just a normal part of life for us. It was every day. Somebody was fighting every day. And nasty, people were getting stabbed, people were getting shot at. But what your brain does after so long of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what your brain turns into, how you
Hmm.
feel of when you feel like, just for lack of a better comparison, feeling like you are in enemy territory all the time. Like
Yeah.
there is always, at everywhere you are, you have to be ready to punk not a motherfucker's head, right
Yeah.
then,
Hmm.
at the drop. And every interaction you have with anybody, most of those interactions are, well, a lot of them, especially if it's another man, they're going to come with he's going to come with a little bit of force, and if you don't respond with the proper amount of force, then that uh that can affect your life, not only in that situation, but how you survive from then on out. Like what the processes that it turns on in your head, these kind of animalistic, violent, but then um kind of glazing your eyes over to them at the same time. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it's a weird thing that happens, and this book captures it perfectly. And
Mm.
I could feel it sometimes when I'm reading it. I get that same feeling that I would have, when I was uh living rough and cocking the pistol every time I answered my door, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Afraid either the police or somebody's gonna come in and, take all my pills or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
it hits so hard if you've experienced extended periods of violence like that, or living like that, and like you see how much of a point he was trying to make with every one of these characters and all of their traits.